What's up, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about American Horror Stories, episode 4, entitled The Naughty List. And quite frankly, this was one of the ones that I was kind of excited for going into this week because we knew that Danny Trejo was going to be playing an evil Santa. And yes, while we have seen evil Santas killing everybody before on American Horror Story, this one seemed at least a little bit exciting from my perspective when we started getting a little bit of teasers and we knew exactly what we were going to be expecting. So like with all of my reviews, I'm going to do a very brief recap of this episode before I get into my general thoughts. And right off the bat, this episode begins with introducing us to our four main characters, Barry, Zen, James, and Wyatt, who are the bro house on YouTube. Obviously, this is riffing off of, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, those brothers, as well as a lot of other internet celebrity influencers of our time. At least in my opinion, it was a really awesome introduction to these characters because we haven't really seen something like this in American Horror Story before. But because we're dealing with influencers and social media channels, then you can have this long, drawn-out introduction to these people where you get a sense of exactly who they are and what you're going to be expecting from them at the very beginning of the episode. And I have to give it to the writing team, that was pretty inspired. But if I have one criticism about that opening as well as the entire episode, it felt like someone my age, maybe just slightly older than me, was the person who wrote this. They do not talk, they do not act, and they do things that seem super outdated for 2021, such as the ice bucket challenge and the no homo thing they tried to do halfway through the episode. And that's one of the problems with American Horror Stories as of late. Even though it's dealing with teens and all of their normal everyday problems for 2021, it feels like it's written by 30 or 40-year-olds who don't fully comprehend everything that's going on or know exactly what's cool. Like, I guess you could argue that the opening concept makes sense if it's kind of an introduction video to their channel and they just haven't updated it in like 4 or 5 years. But it doesn't really make sense when you're looking at it through the context of what's happening in normal day, or they're bringing up concepts that seem like they went out of taboo a couple of years ago. I don't know, it kind of feels really weird, and I don't think I'm the only one thinking this. I would really wish that American Horror Stories would focus on more adult individuals, but I guess the point here is younger kids watch streaming services, so you're going to try to hook the younger kids by giving them stuff that they can relate to, like drive-in movie theaters or influencers who are doing things that went out of style years ago. I don't know. It's a bad idea. Anyway, that's probably going to be my strangest and most negative tangent about this episode because for the most part, it was phenomenal. From beginning to end, I was laughing my ass off, and these four characters, probably throughout the vast majority of American Horror Story, their brief introduction and our very limited time with them, because of their real-world counterparts, just feel like the best antagonist for a story such as this. Right from the beginning, we're introduced to the bro house and their worry about becoming 30 and becoming a little bit obsolete in terms of influencer status, and using that motivation to constantly push the envelope as to what they want to do with their content, eventually leading them to camp out all night to watch somebody come to a popular suicide spot in order to commit their own suicide. And instead of helping, they go out of their way to film it, as well as just generally reacting very positively to this traumatic situation. And then after some brief fighting amongst the group, with Barry, the oldest of the bunch and the person behind the camera, insisting that they do not post this video because of the online backlash, he eventually caves in to Zen and everybody else who thinks it's going to be an internet sensation and finally push their channel above 5 million subscribers. However, when they finally decide to post the video in front of their entire house party, they're immediately hit with a universally negative reaction that sends their channel tail spinning and them searching for more ideas on how to save their content, which eventually leads them to pretend that they're quasi-homosexual and then back into their earlier disruptive content. But probably because of the stress of the situation, they find themselves going a little bit overboard at the mall when they decide to attack the mall Santa. And that's what eventually puts them in the path of Danny Trejo's Santa Claus, who instead of just being the average mall Santa is in fact a serial killer who goes around killing mall Santas and then taking their place. And because they slighted him, he's going to take revenge. So he shows up at these guys' house and literally butchers them one after another while posting the videos of their deaths to their YouTube channel, which ultimately sends them over 5 million subscribers because people are just voyeuristic for chaos, I guess. Going into this episode, I was a little more than shocked at the runtime of it. It's 38 minutes compared to 48 minutes versus the first 2 episodes of this series that ran nearly an hour. And just looking at that timestamp for this specific episode and thinking about my criticism last week about how American Horror Stories doesn't seem to understand that it cannot tell a huge story in a very short amount of time because you don't have multiple episodes to really flesh out the characters, I was more than a little worried. The difference between this episode and the last episode, or maybe even the first 2, is that these characters, despite their overly long, exposition-heavy introduction, do not need introducing to the general audience. Even if the dialogue and the reality of the situation feels like it was written and structured by somebody who was decades older than the people that we're supposed to be following, we know who these characters are. And for the most part, I feel like the vast majority of people watching can really get behind not liking them to begin with. So after a very brief period of watching these characters spiral into literally chaos in their content creation, seeing the carnage that unfolds is more cathartic than it is horrifying. And I swear that's probably why I found this episode so endearing. I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody that this is going to be the same energy or the same stuff that they're going to bring week after week for this show, but I feel like this episode really did its best to help uplift my enthusiasm for this new spinoff series. Seriously, I am kind of shocked about how much I liked this episode and just how crisp and clean it was. If I had to think of another criticism, even though I don't feel like this is a major criticism, is that one of the things I wanted to see in American Horror Story proper is a season dedicated to the Christmas season. I understand that Halloween is something that is fairly scary to most people, but I feel like if you really hunker down and focus on all of this stuff we do for Christmas, and it's year-round or whatever they decide to do with it, that would be pretty horrifying. And it's something that I feel can be used to great effect if given 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 episodes. And I don't know if they're ever going to do it now because they did this. But given the ending of it, where Danny Trejo's Santa character gets away with it, it's fairly dark compared to most things American Horror Story, you could just bring him back and he could be a part of a Christmas season. Let's do that. One of the things that I would really like to see for this franchise, especially the spinoff, is them kind of using these episodes to pitch ideas. Like, do we want to go back to Murder House more in the main series? Or do we want to do something completely different? Maybe a Christmas season. That's what this is to me. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. Guys, fantastic episode. Danny Trejo kills it. And while I don't normally do this, I have to give props to the main characters of this show because I feel like they played their parts to perfection. So that was Kevin McHale as Barry, Nico Greetham as Zen, Charles Melton as Wyatt, and Dylan Burnside as James. Along, as I already said, Danny Trejo as Santa Claus. Guys, I hope you liked this review and that you actually watched the episode before you came here and listened to my thoughts and opinions on it. If you haven't, go watch this episode right now. It's only 38 minutes. It's been real. What's up, everybody? So YouTube being what it is, I posted this video a couple years back. It's pretty much dead. Nobody watches it, but because this is a new episode and it is related, I thought I would throw it at the very end of this video in order to get more people's attention to it. Hope you liked the pitch. If you don't want to listen to it and you just wanted the review, that's totally fine. See you next week. First thing I want to address when it comes to this pitch is I know the subtitles for American Horror Story usually place us where we're going to be. I mean, it gives us an idea of where everything is going to be set, and it's not going to be so open and broad. The subtitles would tell us that we're going to be in a murder house, an asylum, a coven, a freak show, a hotel, Roanoke itself, or a cult. But with American Horror Story Apocalypse, I think that they've broadened that spectrum, and now they allow this television show to look into bigger and broader places and to tell broader stories. Yes, I know that's a little bit of a nitpick, but this is why I think American Horror Story Christmas could actually work. And I personally believe that the story writes itself, and it doesn't mean that this next season, or if ever they do this story, has to take place solely on Christmas. I think that they can do some unique and genuine social commentary
by telling the same kind of structured story that they've always told in an American Horror Story television show. You can start it in September, work your way into October and early November, or maybe just start in October and then work your way through November, working up to that Christmas episode. Or they can start the season in late October, work their way through November, and then end the season sometime in December. And this would actually allow for a lot of holiday episodes. You have probably a Halloween, a Thanksgiving, and then even a Christmas episode all placed into this season. But the one thing that you really focus on from the very beginning is this town, or wherever it's actually set, is dead focused on Christmas as soon as fall hits. And that is scary to the newcomers who move to this town. My whole idea here is you have a family or something, kind of like the Harmons from Murder House, upending their lives and then moving to this secluded small town for one reason or another, and you really build it up from there. But it's not just the house is weird, it's this whole place is weird. And as I said, social commentary. You get there, it's early fall, it's not even Halloween yet. I mean, it's kind of Halloween's a couple of weeks off or maybe a couple days off, and people are just celebrating Christmas and getting ready for Christmas. And first it starts off as this is a weird town. I can't believe like everyone here is celebrating Christmas. Or maybe the entire populace of this town comes across, at least at the beginning, as ultra conservative, war against Christmas. We're going to celebrate our truth and value type of people. So it really comes across as loving and nurturing, but just as kind of a stranglehold idea. And until you get further along in the season and realize what they're actually all about. And really, Christmas is such a fun breeding ground for a lot of horror movie tropes and just a lot of stuff you can go around. I think one of the things you could do, and when I put this on my community tab asking if people would actually like to see an American Horror Story Christmas, people jumped on the concept of Krampus. Yes, Krampus has gotten a lot more popular in popular culture over the last couple years, probably because of this whole bah humbug mentality that people have about the holidays. Like, people don't want the holiday season to feel so loving and genuine. It's not the nostalgic thing that they want to grow up with or they remember as kids, and they actually want to go directly against the holidays. So Krampus has grown in popularity and shown up in various television shows and movies over the last couple years. But that is the exact story I think they could tell here and be relevant. You have these culture of people that seem like they're celebrating Christmas, they're good Christians, but then it becomes more pagan and worshiping, and these new people are the ones that are kind of the outliers, and maybe, you know, they have kids or younger kids who converse with some of the younger kids in the town, and that's the real story you're playing up. Like, maybe people start going missing as Krampus comes and kidnaps and eats children, and that's what we're really leading up to this entire time. Personally, if you're going to do this season, I think that there is some great opportunities to bring back some of the classic American Horror Story actors. I mean, just having Kathy Bates, I think, in this small little town play the mayor or someone in power of this. Sarah Paulson could be the mother of the family that comes to town, and maybe even bringing back other people who we haven't seen for a long time. Dylan McDermott would be awesome to have back in a major way. If you're gonna bring back Cody Fern, I would like to see him play a good guy in this season. I mean, he played the hell out of Michael Langdon, but that was more of an evil role. Let's see him play a nice guy for once, you know, someone who is in over his head and someone that we cheered for the entire time, but not really for like the worst ways that we cheered for Michael during American Horror Story Apocalypse. Of course, you could also bring back, and maybe this is just wishful thinking on my part, but I really think that any future season of American Horror Story really has to try its hardest to bring back Jessica Lange in some role. Even if it's just a little small role, she needs to be back because she is just such a presence, and this show really isn't the same without her. I mean, she was gangbusters in American Horror Story Apocalypse, and we need to continue on that momentum. But I would love to see her come back in this type of story, maybe as a social recluse, this old woman who has this dark secret history behind her. She knows way more about this town than she's really ever letting on. Of course, I'm not the writer here. Obviously, a lot of these characters that I'm pitching here are similar to characters that we've seen these people play in other ways. Ryan Murphy and his writing team are so much better at this stuff than I am, and I would really leave it up to them to figure out the best characters and arcs for the people that they've gotten to be on this show every single year, and I think that they would be able to come up with something pretty unique and genuine. This is just me throwing out ideas because I really like these people, I like these stories, and the very fact that every single season is going to be completely new and original. Just kind of spitballing ideas here. It would be really awesome to have an American Horror Story Christmas at some point before the series is out. Of course, I can say that about almost any idea that they can come up with. There's so many things that, even though it feels like American Horror Story has really dug to the bottom of the barrel when it comes to horror movie concepts and things that they can really do. Things and creatures and stuff that they can tell stories about. I think that there's still a whole lot of gas left in the tank, and we can talk for hours about various pitches and ideas. And as I said at the beginning of the video, you just kind of throw out an idea just as a subtitle and you can start theorizing and speculating and just having a whole lot of fun coming up with various story concepts and how that's going to play out as the season goes on. So yeah, American Horror Story Christmas, a new family moves to a new secluded town, ultra conservative, war on Christmas type of people, celebrating Christmas from very early fall, even before Halloween, through Thanksgiving, and up to Christmas time. And these people, as it goes along, get darker and more pagan, creepy. This isn't normal type of traditions, and cult-like mentalities start to really show themselves as you get closer and closer to Christmas. I think that would be a really fun season. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you want to see an American Horror Story Christmas? Would you be down for that? Are you not okay with that? Tell me why you're not okay with that in the comment section. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell over by the subscriber button to notify you every single time I upload. And if you guys want to talk to me about American Horror Story, the Saw franchise, any type of horror movie franchise, the box office, anime stuff, or anything else, go check me out on Twitter. It's so much easier to talk to you guys over there. Really instant communication. I'm on it all the time, so make sure to go do that if you want to talk, in a one-on-one situation. So hope everyone is having a fantastic day. It's been real.